And Senator,
you said every Republican, other than the ones that you like, have their position on abortion because they're misogynistic.
well, Senator,
Do you believe in God?
Senator,
Ms. Giles, your son's name is Pierce?
Yes, Senator. And thank you for that kindness you shown him.
Well, I'm happy to. Is this Pierce right behind you here?
Yes, it is.
Mr. Pierce, you have anything you want to add to this? How about vote for your mom?
Yes.
Mr. Dellinger, I'm not going to ask you about what happened in law school, and I was glad to hear you talking about being nonpartisan. You must have had an epiphany. I want to read you a tweet. It's from 2019. You weren't in law school then, were you?
I was not, Senator.
How old were you then?
I had passed over half a century.
This is what the tweet says. Yes, there are some women GOP peers, meaning members of the Republican Party, and a tiny number of Democrats who want government, not women, to control women's bodies. But if there were no Republican men in elected office, there would be no abortion bans. Did you write that?
Senator, I do not recall that specific tweet, but I do not deny writing it.
You wrote it.
Okay.
Here it is, bigger than Dallas. Do you think that my votes with respect to abortion are based on the fact that I want to control women?
Senator, I cannot speak to that.
Well, why'd you say it in front of God and country?
Well, Senator, I do believe that the reproductive rights established in Roe versus Wade and then dealt with in Casey, June Medical, and other Supreme Court decisions are important.
And that's fine. I agree with that.
Well,
reasonable people disagree, but that's not what you said, Counselor.
Right. And Senator,
you said every Republican, other than the ones that you like, have their position on abortion because they're misogynistic.
well, Senator,
Do you believe in God?
Senator, I have faith. I believe. I certainly.
A lot of people have faith.
Right.
Did it ever occur to you that some people may base their position on abortion on their faith?
Senator, I sincerely appreciate people who have a different position on abortion than I do.
You sure don't tweet it. Have you ever tweeted that?
Well, Senator, I'm saying it now under oath, and I do.
Yeah, you're up to be nominated. You want me to vote for you?
Well, Senator, I am determined to tell the truth, and if I could make clear, Senator, and I appreciate your question, your concern, that, Senator, I recognize the difference between someone saying something, inartfully as a private citizen and working as a lawyer, and I think I've got a 30-year track record of being open-minded.
Okay, I get all that.
And just like
I got to move on. We don't have much time, Counselor. Jeez. Do you believe the Justice Department is systemically racist?
Senator, I believe every institution in our country exists on a history.
Yeah, but do you believe the Justice Department is systemically racist?
Well, Senator, if I could, I believe every institution in our country has dealt with racism and sexism.
No, but
and
today,
xenophobia.
I agree with that. But I'm just asking a simple question. Today, do you believe the Justice Department is systemically racist?
I do not believe the Justice Department.
What about the law firm of Hampton Dellinger? That's your law firm. Is it systemically racist?
Senator, I have done my best to try.
Simple question. Do you believe it's systemically racist?
Right, and I'm trying to answer it, sir.
I know. I think you're trying to dodge it, but you go ahead.
Well, sir, I certainly do not try to practice systemic racism. I do recognize.
Neither do I. But is your law firm systemically racist?
It is not.
How about your former law firm, Boies Schiller? Are they systemically racist? You got a bunch of racists there?
Certainly, they have tried to deal with implicit bias, to recognize it, and to remove any barriers.
Are they systemically racist?
I have no reason to think that they are.
All right, I'm out of time. Man, that's not just one tweet, Counselor. You got them, a whole bunch of them here. Long as King Kong's arm.
We recognize Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to all the nominees. Thanks for being here. Mr. Dellinger, I'd like to start with you, if I could. The office that you are being nominated for, Office of Legal Policy, is a very important one, obviously, at the Department of Justice, one with a long and proud tradition. It will play an important role in the vetting and nomination of judicial nominees, or at least it has traditionally. So I want to ask you some questions about the court, starting with the current member of the court about whom you've had relatively a lot to say. Some of what you said, frankly, surprises me, and I want to give you an opportunity to clarify the record here. I'm talking about Justice Clarence Thomas. When you were in law school, you wrote an attack on Justice Thomas, saying that before he even took his seat on the United States Supreme Court, he was illegitimate. You said using the word justice with regard to Clarence Thomas was an oxymoron, and that his decisions would never have any legitimacy. That's quite a series of charges to make against a man like Justice Thomas, who's now stood on the court for quite a length of time. He's faced quite a lot in his life, I think. His life story is well known. His unique position on the court is well known. So let me just give you an opportunity here to address these very serious accusations. Do you regard Justice Thomas as an illegitimate member of the United States Supreme Court?
I do not, Senator Hawley.
Do you regard his opinions as illegitimate?
I do not.
Would you want to clarify your views now and what has changed since you authored those attacks on Justice Thomas?
Well, thank you, Senator Hawley. We shared the same law school, and I wrote those comments in law school approximately 30 years ago at a time of contentious and momentous nomination and confirmation hearing. A lot of time has passed. I certainly acknowledged immediately the outcome of that. Justice Thomas was granted a lifetime appointment. I recognize his service on the court. I recognize the historic nature of his service on the court as the second African-American justice. I recognize that he has been an important figure in the law, and I have the highest regard for the United States Supreme Court, for the justices who are confirmed to lifetime appointments, and I've recognized that throughout his time on the court.
Good. So in other words, it sounds like to me what I hear you saying is that you would retract these comments and regret that you made them those years ago.
Right. I can't turn back time. And again, those comments were made 30 years ago when I was a student. They do not reflect my recognition of his service on the court and the importance of his service on the court.
Good, very good. Let me ask you about some other comments you've made about various Supreme Court cases. You've been a pretty fierce critic of the Supreme Court's cases, recent cases regarding election integrity. You said that conservatives on the Supreme Court are a major barrier to your view of what ought to happen with election rules in this country. You've criticized the Crawford case, which was written by Justice Stevens, by the way, not a notable conservative, the Rucho case, RNC versus DNC, the McCutcheon case, Citizens United, the McDonald case, the Kelly case. Given your stance on these, I assume you're probably also a critic of the recent Brnovich case. Am I to take from this that you will be an advocate for appointing judges and justices who will seek to overturn these decisions?
No, Senator. The decision on who to nominate lies exclusively with the president. The Office of Legal Policy plays an important role, but a limited role. And it's similar to a role I played in North Carolina as the governor's chief legal counsel, which is to vet the background and qualifications of potential nominees for the president to be considered.
Well, if I could just interrupt you there, but you and I both know that that's where the real work is done. I mean, the list that gets to the president, right, that's where the real spade work is done. So what I'm asking, you're going to play if you're confirmed, you play a very important role in this process. You've been very outspoken and very critical about all of these cases. and you've been very fiercely critical of those who, on the Republican side of the aisle, who have fought for election integrity, and of the United States Supreme Court. So let's come back to this again. Will you be an advocate for appointing judges and justices who will seek to overturn these decisions, the McCutcheon case, Citizens United, the McDonald case, the Crawford case?
Senator, I recognize all of those cases as the law of the land. And I will say, Senator, that I do think in the area of public corruption,
But I'm sorry to interrupt you. We have a really short time, or my time's almost over. What I'm asking you to think is, do you advocate that they be overturned? I understand you recognize them as the law of the land. Of course they are. They're controlling precedent. But the Supreme Court can revise its own precedent, as we know. So you're going to have an important advisory role. Will you advocate for judges and justices who will seek to limit and overturn these cases that you've criticized so fiercely?
Senator, I will not be an advocate in the role that I hope to be confirmed for.
My time has expired. I'll have some more questions for you for the record. Thank you, Mr. Dellinger. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
Mr. Dellinger, you stated on December 16th, 2019, that independent groups cannot, quote, engage in hate speech at federally funded schools without violating federal civil rights laws. What is hate speech?
Well, Senator, I believe hate speech is speech directed at a particular ethnic group or nationality intended to intimidate. We do not, prosecute speech lightly. It never should. Prosecution should be focused on actions, but I do think there are certain instances where speech is directed at a racial or ethnic minority with the intent to intimidate.
And you think that violates our Constitution and federal civil rights laws?
Senator, I think it can if it is intended to convey a threat, to suggest
a threat is different from hate speech. I'm asking for a definition of hate speech.
Well,
a clear standard that a judge might apply.
Senator, I appreciate the difficulty of this area. And it's in North Carolina, we have had a hate speech act, but when we see intimidation and threats that appear to be motivated by racial or other...
Intimidations and threats are different. That's not hate speech.
Well,
it can be motivated out of hate, but threats are a clear and different legal standard.
What I was going to...
I'm trying to figure out, you didn't say threats and intimidation on December 16th, 2009. You said hate speech at federally funded schools without violating federal civil rights laws. So I presume you have in mind some definition of what hate speech is.
Well, Senator, I think I had in mind what has been in statutes. And the statutes I'm most familiar with, usually ethnic intimidation will convey an enhanced or might have an enhanced penalty to it. I think prosecutors have to be very careful in this area. I completely understand the First Amendment concerns, and I share them. But I do think whether it's the General Assembly in North Carolina or Congress has been willing to say that for certain types of intimidation or threats that seem to be motivated by racial or other impermissible animus, there can be an enhanced penalty.
Does the Constitution allow the government to treat any American differently based on his or her skin color?
It depends on what is being treated. If it is identified discrimination based on race or gender or sexual orientation, then under the Constitution, under Supreme Court precedents, that those characteristics can be considered in remedying that identified discrimination.
For a specific institution to remedy specific past discrimination?
Well, that has been established before a court, and there's going to be a remedial effort to deal with it. That's my understanding, Senator.
But in other instances, the government must, of course, treat all citizens equally, irrespective of their race.
Well, Senator, that is going to be defined by the Supreme Court. I recognize there are a number of areas where neutrality is the best approach. You think about the Texas Top 10% plan or raising the minimum wage. There are a number of areas where you may be able to address disparate historic treatment in a race or gender neutral way.
Do you agree with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. that we should judge people by the content of their character and not the color of their skin?
Yes.
Let's turn to a couple Supreme Court decisions. You've voiced your support repeatedly for Roe v. Wade. You believe that Roe v. Wade was correctly decided?
I do, Senator.
Do you believe that DC versus Heller was correctly decided?
I certainly, there has been a range of views about
The first
that.
one was very easy. The second one is not so easy. Can you-
No, what I was going to say applies to both, which is there has been a range of discussion and disputation about both decisions.
So Roe v. Wade was very easy for you to say correctly decided. Why is DC versus Heller not so easy? Probably because you disagree with Heller, right?
Well, sir, they're both the law of the land. With Casey,
No, they're the law.
Well,
You're
I was
not up for a judge.
Right.
You're not up to be a judge. Like
Right.
the office you're up for literally has policy in its title. I bet I could ask Judge Williams if he thought Marbury v. Madison was correctly decided. He'd probably say, I can't decide that. I can't say it because I'm going to be a judge. That's
Well,
why I'm asking you.
I could.
Literally, policy is in the title. What's the difference between Roe v. Wade, quick yes answer, DC v. Heller, a hedged answer? Is it because you don't agree with DC v. Heller?
No, I might have, if I was a justice of the Supreme Court, which I will not be, I might have voted with the minority in that case, but that's not relevant to the position I've been nominated for.
Actually, it's very relevant. You're going to be reviewing all these judges. I bet you're going to try to find judges who share your views on DC v. Heller and the Second Amendment. Anyway, my time's expired. Senator Tillis was very generous. We've got a vote to go to as well, so